In 1896, two men, Charles Hart and Charles Parr, took their design for a gasoline-powered traction combustion engine from their thesis for the University of Wisconsin and began manufacturing engines in Madison. However, Hart and Parr did not have the community support there to build a successful factory. Charles Hart was originally from Charles City, Iowa, and on a trip home, he was encouraged to set up a factory there. Local investors C.D. Ellis, A.E. Ellis, and N. Fruden sent a proposal to Hart and Parr for capital support and land for a factory in Charles City. Hart and Parr accepted, and their company was incorporated in Charles City on June 12, 1901, with a capitalization of $100,000, over $3 million today. By July of the following year, the Hart-Parr Company made their first tractor, the number 1, and sold it to David Jennings of Clear Lake, Iowa. In 1902, Hart-Parr began work on a second model. They began their first production run, producing and selling 13 within the next year, making Hart-Parr the first company to successfully mass-produce tractors. They would go on to make more tractor models and become internationally known. Hart-Parr was mass-producing tractors years before International Harvester and the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company, which would be purchased by John Deere in 1918. Hart-Parr thus were the founders of the tractor industry. In 1929, Hart-Parr merged with the Oliver Chilled Plow Company of South Bend, Indiana, the Nichols and Shepard Threshing Machine Company of Battle Creek, Michigan, and the American Seeding Company of Springfield, Ohio, to form the Oliver Farm Equipment Company, headquartered in Chicago. The plant in Charles City continued to produce tractors, first branded as Hart-Parr Oliver, then Oliver Hart-Parr, and eventually just Oliver. Oliver acquired the Cleveland Tractor Company, also known as Cletrac, in 1944, and switched its name from the Oliver Farm Equipment Company to the Oliver Corporation. During this time, Oliver manufactured various implements at its different plants around the country. On top of tractors, Oliver also made industrial equipment, all kinds of agricultural implements and outboard motors. Unfortunately, the non-agricultural divisions of Oliver began to lose money, and by 1960, the only profitable division of the company was farm equipment. That year, the White Motor Corporation of Cleveland, Ohio, purchased Oliver, and all divisions besides agricultural were discontinued. The Oliver brand continued even after the White purchase. The plant in Charles City thrived, and new models of Oliver tractors continued to be produced. In 1962, White purchased the Cockshut Farm Equipment Company of Brantford, Ontario. In 1963, White acquired Minneapolis Moline of Hopkins, Minnesota. Both of these companies were manufacturers of agricultural equipment. In 1969, they were combined with Oliver to form the White Farm Equipment Company. The Oliver, Cockshut, and Minneapolis Moline brands continued until 1975, when White rebranded the tractor line. After that, White produced gray tractors with the White logo.
White Motor went into bankruptcy in 1980. Every time we reduced our workforces or we shut the plant down for an indefinite period, that always caused a lot of people to lose their jobs, either temporarily or permanently. And there was a period of uncertainty until late that same year when the assets of Oliver or White Farm, I should say, were purchased by a company in Texas called TIC Investment Company. I was able to operate the White Farm Company at the various locations till about 1985. We were in a farm crisis, and the farmers were going bankrupt. Farms were being taken over by the banks, and as a result, the farm machinery sales were very, very limited, and we had overproduction and low sales. So again, in 1985, bankruptcy occurred. Another company came in and purchased the assets. That company was Allied Products Company, a conglomerate from Chicago. And that company made a real effort to make White Farm a strong company. Nevertheless, in the early 90s, the finances didn't improve that much, and consequently, the plant here was shut down in 93 and consolidated with other holdings that Allied had in Ohio and Kansas City.
In 1987, Allied combined White Farm Equipment with New Idea Farm Equipment to create White New Idea. After this, tractor assembly was slowly ended at the Charles City plant and transferred to the plant in Coldwater, Ohio. The last White tractor to leave the assembly line was a White 100 on March 25, 1988. The Charles City plant continued to manufacture transaxles and, for a time, assembled Iseki tractors. The last Iseki tractor to leave Charles City was in June 1988. The White tractor line was sold to the Deutz Alles Corporation in June 1991. At that time, tractor production in Charles City had already ended, but the plant continued to make transaxles and other parts.
But they also showed our profitability per week, and we were highly profitable. This Charles City facility was making big money because we weren't just supplying tractor parts, we were supplying mower gearboxes for New Idea, for Heston, for we were for Bush Hog. We were the casting, heat treat, machining, a subassembly factory for all of Allied products. And so it was a lot of those components were shipped out. You wouldn't know it. They just went out on a truck, but they were all sub-assemblies, but highly technical stuff.
In November 1992, Allied announced the foundry and machining operations in Charles City would end mid-year 1993. On July 31st, 400 workers left the Charles City tractor plant, and the decades-long reputation of tractor manufacturing in Charles City came to an end. Items and machinery at the plant were auctioned off in October, and in November 1994, demolition began on the almost 100-year-old factory site. What remains is a cement slab and the dilapidated outline of the test track once used by the factory. The legacy of tractor manufacturing remains an important part of Floyd County history. Many locals have family members who once worked at the iconic Hart-Parr Oliver White plant in Charles City. For decades, it was the largest employer in town, at its peak employing around 3,000 people. The tractors manufactured in this little town in Iowa are still beloved by many antique tractor collectors around the world. Tractors still in use today preserve the agricultural history of Charles City and keep alive the dedication of all the men and women who once worked at the tractor plant.
There was times, I remember that we were told that our facility was the only profitable one of all the White motor places that they owned. It was pretty hard. I couldn't drive past it when the plant was still there, knowing how many years I'd spent there and what a good place it was to work. And if I needed to go up the other side of Charles City, I would kind of go around that because it just would sometimes bring tears to my eyes.